good with y'all, man? My name is Macshooter49. I got 50K on YouTube, a successful sound kit company, and I got major placements. Let's lock in. Today I'll be breaking down a vintage soul sample. I kind of hear J. Cole on it, Larry June, Meek Mill, etc. I really like this one because there's a lot of layers and a lot of parts to it with some sections, so you guys are in for a treat. This is about 80% all me in terms of what I did in terms of like MIDIs and VST, and then I just used some phrases from, of course, PG, Artist Pack, and just some AYN strings. So before we get into the sample, I start off at 77 BPM. I like to make these vintage soul samples in halftime. I don't know why. I see all these vintage sample makers doing it, so I'm like, okay, let me try. I guess it's to have more freedom when it comes to the control and the speed of things. So the first thing I did was I started off with the keys. I played these in, and this is the Simple Sam Samples Vintage Upright. I even did a little trick from my boy Oscar Zulu. You put the tuning down on contact, a whole octave, and then you pitch it up, and that's how you can get a cool sampled low bitrate piano sound. In terms of the chords, we're in A sharp minor. I'm not the greatest at chord theory, guys. I just listen to what sounds good and what sounds in the scale. And so since I like to save CPU, I also rendered the chords out as well. All this is almost all rendered out. And for this, even though I don't have it on here, since I consolidated it, I used an Abbey Road Chambers to have it sound like a bathroom effect and just a little bit of EQ. The next thing I wanted to add, since I have the foundation, is a bass line. This is the same process that I use to make vintage samples. I like to have a piano or a Rode or organ and then add a bass line and then add extra stuff. Or sometimes, very rarely, I start with a bass line, but that's not the case here. You want to have rhythm within your basses, especially for making like soul samples and vintage stuff, because the bass can act as the melody and the drum. So I even did a second bass part. I kind of wanted to layer it, and I didn't want to treat it just like a regular bass. I kind of want to have like a bass with a counter bass that goes kind of higher up. You could use another instrument, you could use a different instrument, but I just wanted to use the bass just because, like, what if you have two basses? You know what I'm saying? Just kind of imagine it like it's like an ensemble. And I spent like so much time on this, yeah, like 3 hours, and I barely spent 3 hours on samples, so that's how you know I was definitely like focusing on this. This is the Rickenbacker bass with no effects put on it, but if you do want the bass to have double effects, use Decapitator. Here's what I got so far. So when I had this, I kind of went a left turn and I added some drums. I used Contact for my drums. I used the Abbey Road 60s drummer. Pretty realistic drums, if I do say so myself. I think I did a pretty good job of shifting these. You know, all of these aren't on the grid, or at least like one of these are, two of these. A little thing at the end here. It's just like a drum set. Instead of using a drum loop, I feel like clicking it in or playing it in, however you want to do it, is just way more natural than just, you know, dragging something in. Because when you have a certain cadence of something, sometimes dragging something in, even if it is from a kit, it sometimes won't match the cadence. It's very rare to like match the vibe. So you have to really create the vibe yourself. You want to make sure that all this isn't like all the way up, you know what I'm saying? You really want to have that realistic humanization feel. So definitely like play around, mix them up, bro. Like I like to use Option R to randomize them, and it randomizes it, and then I put them down like this. That's fire. Definitely do that, and also strum too. You already know what I mean. Don't keep it on the grid 100%. I like how the percussion sounds mixed in with the little at the end. As you can hear that I always do them like little rolls at the end. Even at the end here. It means it's like going into the next thing. Kind of just like progressing, going up the mountain. So think of like this sample as kind of like a mountain. We start the top, kind of go down, and then we go down. Simpler sections, simpler arrangements. Next up, I added some strings. As you see in the last part, I kind of wanted to have some sort of sense of urgency because the first bar is ending. I put that D sharp up because it's like the higher the string goes, like the more emotional it could kind of get. No effects on that, and I used something called string murmurations. These are from the Crow Hill Company. Very, very, very great strings. As you can hear them, like they just sound amazing. And as you see, there's a lot of space within it because I wanted to have it spaced out. I wanted to have like a little accent. And I always put at the end of the bar because it's going into the next, you know? As you see, it's coming to a close here. Next. And of course, the last one. Like I said, now you'll understand why that 11th on the strings is there, because it adds that urgency. Next up, I added some horns. And I barely use horns, bro, unless it's like from a real horn player or from a royalty-free website. I'm not a big fan of horn VSTs. I think they're very hard to replicate. I'm using Opus for this, and I use the Hollywood Fantasy Brass. It sounds completely different when it's played away from the foundation. Like the root notes are different and stuff like that. So when it's played with, like, let's say the bass, I'm letting that do the work. Next up, I added another horn section. Once again, playing with the velocities. And they're very, very sensitive, so that the ending, it was just a little tiny bit velocity up. Before I get into the next section, I do want to say that you do see a lot of these little accents and endings at the end of these bars. They're not put in the front. I kind of wanted having leading up to something. So think about it, like it goes into the da-na, da-na, da-da. When it gets to that that 2, I want to have it built up, and so that's why I did that da-da-da. Fire. And then at the end, of course, that sense of urgency. Listen to the horns with the strings. Throw a little drum work on there. I used the East-West Hollywood Fantasy Brass, and I think this is the staccato one. The last one was the sustained accent brass. Let's play everything we have right now. Seven layers right now. Anything after this are mini accents, vocals, and just stuff that you can barely hear. Next, I added this vocal from AYN Sounds. As you see, This is consolidated because I had to use Melodyne for it. If there's anything that you have that isn't in MIDI form, put it in Melodyne and make sure it's on polyphonic sustain. And that's when it will generate the MIDI for you and you could just play around with it. And so I was like, okay, nah, this is too hard. This gotta fit on here. And the last three things I added from the artist pack. A saxophone, and a firewall guitar. If y'all want some of these sounds, y'all already know where to go. Link in description, pin comment for the free artist pack. Also, if you're interested in more videos like these, I got a bunch of modules in my new masterclass that's about to drop, bro. Go join the waiting list, link in description. It's worth it. This was like the intro. Low key chill, but this part right here though, you got so much going on. Like, that's when the band starts to play. That's when the orchestra starts to come out, man. I feel like this sample needed some sort of organ and some sort of Rhodes, like, especially with vintage gospel samples or like samples like these. Rhodes or organs are just necessary, bro. I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know what I was on, bro, but I played this in. And I definitely took some time to rearrange the MIDI because it did not sound like that when I played it. But I did start the idea and, you know, spilling a little bit, one of the modules in the masterclass talks about playing in over MIDI and why it's so important. So I'm telling y'all, make sure I go get that. I'll be going in depth there. You just can't click this in, you know, like at an efficient pace. It would have took me 30 minutes to do something like this, or I would have had something less complex than this, where it would take away from the substance of the sample. Next up, I added the string and brass phrases from AYN. So this is just another Rhodes section. It always leads up to something. It's not the same thing repeated over and over again. Like, something is different within each section. And the last thing in this second section are these final strings. This is from AYN again, and this is just the resolve, and this is actually going into resolve, which is crazy, which is just coming back to the beginning again. That Let me play out the second section real quick. For the last part, there's no VST or MIDI involved. This is just a bunch of sounds from the kit. It's really self-explanatory, just filling in the pockets. I don't know if I have to go really in depth on that, basically, one by one. Saxophone, bass, little texture, and this thing right here, some percussion. There's a texture at the end right here. So this section, I was like getting lazy. I was like, you know what? I want to add a third section, but I already spent 2.5 hours on it, bro. Let me just work my move with this shooter kit. And I feel like it could really help beginners and professionals too, but mostly beginners that if you don't know how to play stuff in and you want to still be efficient and you're still learning the basics, accents and phrases and layering vocals, bro, and all that will really help, bro. Don't pay attention to what people say, what music is, you know, it's all subjective. So I would just say do what you want. And on top of that, these sounds are royalty free, so no clearance is needed. For intermediate sample makers and even some advanced, it's good to just speed up the workflow, use as starters, and just layer with what you play. If you got like a synth at home, you can layer that with the phrase. Overall, bro, accents, phrases, and tools is basically just royalty free sampling. And so let me play the last part for y'all. Listen to music that has that vintage feel, you know, or anything that you want to make. If you want to make an Amapiano, listen to Amapiano. You know what I'm saying? Listen to vintage samples. Listen to a different variety of music. I've recently just started doing this. I was the worst. I couldn't make anything like this, I would say, like last year or 2 years ago. Since this year, since I got more into listening to like the Marvin Gaye, Prince, even though this isn't like those type of samples, it's still just expanding my horizon. Keep layering, keep turning things down, keeping it in the background. Keep adding them accents and transitions, and yeah, you got yourself a fire sample. If you want more videos like these, I have tons of modules like these, breaking down samples, melodic samples, dark samples, vintage samples, showing all the vocal processing, my favorite VSTs for processing, VST generators, MIDIs, accents, bonus videos, and also drum sauce with the FL project files. Shout out to ProducerGrind, shout out TB, man. Join the masterclass waiting list.